1. I worked as a cashier and bagger at a local grocery store. Pretty big chain in the mid-Atlantic US. I started as a bagger and then was trained as a cashier after a year. I got paid a bit over minimum wage and usually worked between 25 to 36 hours a week, mostly 7.5-hour shifts. So they didn't have to give me lunch, just a 15-minute break, which I wasn't guaranteed. It was a pretty shit job, and people were always calling off. If you've worked or do work in retail, you can probably guess why. So there was usually a lot of available shifts so long as you didn't go over on your hours. If you were part-time and over 18 like I was, you couldn't work more than 36 hours a week. At the time of this story, I had been working there for about 3 years, and I was well liked by mostly everyone. I had customers who would only check out with me if I was working, and I generally just kept busy if things were slow. I'd empty the trash cans under the register, refill bags, etc. My supervisors generally had me in the express lanes on Sundays, always our busiest day, because they knew I could do the job and I would do it right. I didn't want to rise to checkout coach, front-end supervisor, because that would mean full-time and no social life, so I was happy where I was. Important note, my store was known as a training store, meaning that we usually had a new manager every 6 months or so. We had a rotation of general managers who were regular, but always at least one manager in training. Generally, they'd move on after 6 months. Sometimes they came back as a department manager, think like dairy or produce, but mostly we never saw them again after their stint was up. Sometimes we got some pretty good ones. Most of them were not great. And then there was Mel. Mel was a manager in training when I started working at 15. She is also a lesbian. Being a lesbian in a small town where being anything but heteronormal in a predominantly red state in the early 2000s was, well, not very common. And Mel was a full-blown feminist lesbian. I don't know if she had a bad experience with men or generally just saw anything with a penis as the source of all her troubles. Regardless, she generally didn't treat us guys very well. She had rotated out after 6 months, and then my senior year came back as a PM front-end manager, FEM. This meant that she was in charge of the checkout area from about 3:30 p.m. to 12:30 a.m. After about 5, the GMs generally went home, and the department managers usually left about the same time. So after 5 p.m., the front-end manager was usually the person in charge of the entire store. They could call a local GM, should they absolutely need to, but they were expected to handle everything that came their way. Our story takes place in August 2007. I had turned 18 back in January. This meant that I could legally work up to 36 hours, and often did. I was also known as the person who would almost always come in if someone called off. Lo and behold, on a random Saturday afternoon, I took a shift working 4 to 11 p.m. as a bagger. I told the manager that I would have to clock out by 10:45 or it would put me over my hours, which the store could get in big trouble for. They said that would be fine. I took the call at 2:30 and I clocked in at 4 on the dot. Talked to the AM FEM to make sure I had to punch out by 10:45 and not a second later. This is key for later. I remember the AM FEM wrote it on the schedule that was kept at the front end. If you were on the schedule as a bagger, that was what you were. They could have you jump on a register if it got busy, but they tried to keep as few lanes open as they could. I was told by the AM FEM to jump on a register for a bit after work rush, and then go out and do carts. I did this and promptly went outside to collect carts. It was a big lot, several acres, and people generally don't put carts in the corrals. As I was the only one doing carts and the day shift slacked off, it was hot as hell that day, there were a lot of carts to collect. I spent a good hour getting the carts back in the store. When I came in, the AM FEM was gone, and in their place was Mel. Mel and I usually butted heads at least once a month. Nothing terrible, but she was known for making me do the shit parts of the job. One time she made me pull an old cooler away from the wall to clean behind it because someone had spilled milk the day before, and it had seeped underneath where the compressor was and so smelled horrific, despite having trained custodial staff. I'd have to mop floors, stock sugar and water, dust around registers, etc. Mind you, she never made any of the girls do this. even if they were just standing around. Just us guys, and me in particular. I have no idea why she disliked me so, but she did, and it sucked. By this point, it was about 6:30. Most of the cashiers were cleaning their belts and then leaving once their shift was up. When I walked in from doing carts, Mel made a beeline for me and told me that I had to stock sugar and water immediately. Biting my tongue, I went to the back to grab a cart to stock sugar and water. This sucked because it was the store-brand 5-pound sugar containers that were never sealed well, and the massive 24-pack water. And while the sugar usually wasn't bad, on a hot day, the water tended to sell out quick, which meant lots of stocking. I spent another 30 minutes refilling the sugar and water before heading back up. I stopped to hit the head and hydrate. Once back up front, it was dead. One cashier, the checkout coach, Mel, and me. The cashier was a girl who I knew. I had dated her best friend briefly, and talked to every now and then. To keep from getting told to do something, I refilled the bags at the end of each lane and collected the baskets. By now it was 7. It was usually extremely dead at this point because there wasn't much to do. I started chatting with the cashier. All of a sudden I hear my name being called. "Nobody unusual 26, come here." I walk over to the front-end counter, where she and her friend, the checkout coach, were just talking before she saw me talking to the cashier. "What's up?" "I know you like talking to the girls, but you're here to work, not waste my time. You know you're supposed to keep busy. You're wasting time here. You can go do garbage now and replace all the bags." I was pissed. Here I was working extra hours and I had to put up with Mel, and being told that I was slacking when it was known that I was a pretty good worker. But as I walked away, a plan formulated. Garbage was just that, collecting garbage. The store had approximately 50 garbage cans of all sizes inside the store. 4 outside by the entrances, 6 in the corrals, and 8 at the gas station that was approximately 200 yards away. Most of the bags were big industrial-sized ones you can fit a Mini Cooper in. Garbage details sucked ass. Generally, if the day shift did it in the morning, it wasn't bad, but they never did. We had to use what we called U-boats, inversed U-shaped handles to collect garbage, which is about as useful as a tanning bed in the Sahara. You could only put a few bags on it at a time before it was full, and you had to go slow so the bags didn't fall off and rip. Sometimes I'd tie the bags to the U-boat, but that meant that they were free to swing around, because I just did the job the way they wanted. I usually asked to do it, but only if the bags were full or ripped. Replacing all the bags, taking them through the store to the compactor, and doing a good job usually took a minimum of 2 hours, but usually closer to 3, which was part of my plan. And once you started garbage, you had to finish it. Which was also part of my plan. Management had problems with people timing it, so they had to leave before doing half of the garbage. I remember going to the back and finding exactly 1 U-boat free. I always grabbed a new roll of bags when doing garbage. Usually, when doing garbage, I'd do the ones nearest the compactor first, so I didn't need to put them on the U-boat. I'd just carry them back. The only department I wasn't allowed to do was the meat department, probably a safety thing with knives and equipment. So I did all the garbage in the back of the store first and then worked my way forward, replacing all the bags as I went. Because the bags were huge, I'd have to tie them smaller so they'd fit the cans. While this isn't hard, they needed to be tight or the bag would fall inside the can, and the can would need to be cleaned out using a hose and sanitizer. I never understood this. I eventually make it to the front end, where I go through and get the garbage from behind the front end. Mel usually watched me, like legit would turn around and watch me do garbage. The U-boat is full, so I wheeled it back to the compactor, which is now full. As I was not a manager, I wasn't allowed to run it, so I had to go get Mel to run it. There was a key to keep it off, which entailed her ordering me to stuff more garbage in it without helping me. The compactor really was just a dumpster that compacted the trash. The door we used only opened to the chute. You had to be careful to make sure the compactor was retracted before adding more garbage to the chute. Otherwise, it could damage the machinery. That was the story I was told. Mel, being the conscientious manager, made sure that it was retracted before I added more. The snag was the machine was slow, especially when the dumpster was empty. There was no way to see how empty it was other than to listen to it and stop it when it seemed to be under stress. As Mel was in a hurry to get back to the front end, ordered me to just stack the garbage in front of the door to the chute, and to let her know when I was done with the garbage, and then I could add the garbage to the chute with her running the compactor. Problem was, I was now heading outside. This was the part that took the longest, as the cans next to the entrance were always full. The corrals were pretty far apart, and their cans were always full. I found a whole fake Christmas tree in a corral garbage can once. And then there was the gas station cans, which were always full. This was going to take at least an hour. It was already about 9, if I was in a hurry, which I wasn't. Why not, you ask? Because it was Saturday night. And Saturday night meant the local farm took their migrant workers out to do their weekly shopping and to wire money back to their families via Western Union. And this farm employed a lot of migrant workers. Think a couple of school buses worth. And where was the local Western Union station? Behind our front end. Who was allowed to operate the terminal? Checkout coaches and managers. How long does it take to send one person's money? About 5 minutes. And I knew, because I knew the farmer, that he chose Saturday because that's usually when the Western Union terminal is free. He usually came around 9 or so. So I act all meek and mild and go outside to do garbage. I do the corrals first and take them in, pile them up outside the compactor. The corrals cans were always disgusting. People put everything in those cans. As I'm going outside for the cans nearest the entrance, I see the farmer's bus pull into the lot. I counted as 32 workers got off the bus and walk into the store. I looked at my watch. This is before cell phones, kiddos. And it's 9:15. Perfect. I take my sweet time doing the garbage by the entrance and even got the one in front of Blockbuster, just to use up more time, dragging my feet all the while. By now it's 9:40. I take a load in. Mel is hard at work at the Western Union computer wiring money. I'll say this for her, she worked hard, but it was bittersweet, because these workers haven't been around women much, and even though they're speaking Spanish, they're talking to her and hitting on her. Mel, who is Hispanic but doesn't look it, understands every word. I'm sure it pained her little black heart to smile as each horny worker tried hitting on her or talking to her. I take the garbage back, piling up the bags in front of the chute. The pile is now waist high, and it reeks. It's August, remember. Back to the gas station, I take my sweet time and get all the gas station bags and the bag in the hut in 2 trips. This takes another 45 minutes, mainly due to the slow-ass walk back. Each time I make sure to just breeze back to the compactor, piling the bags and heading back outside. I made sure one bag ripped, so I had to stop and put that bag in another bag. Don't want to leave a mess now, do we? Then take it back inside. I drop off the U-boat and clean it off. We had to hose it down, otherwise the smell would be worse. So I made sure the U-boat was really clean. I spent 10 minutes hosing it down and getting it nice and pretty. It's now 10:40, 5 minutes before I have to punch out. I walk very slowly up to the front end. Mel has gotten through about half of the migrant workers. The migrant workers are just shooting the bull and having a good time, not working and flirting with the cashier. Most of them went back to the bus to wait. I know some of them were not legal. Mel, the garbage is all done.
Wait, good. Did you throw it down the chute?
Nope. You told me to come find you so you could compact it.
Just go back there and throw it in the chute. I'm busy.
Sorry, Mel, no can do.
What do you mean? Nobody unusual 626. Go throw the damn garbage in the chute.
I can't. I need to leave. I swear she turned tomato red.
You can't leave. Go throw the garbage away and do it now. I'm writing you up for insubordination.
Does that mean I get overtime pay?
What? No, why would you get overtime?
Because I need to punch out in about a minute or I'll be over my hours, and you'll have to explain to the GM why I have to get overtime pay.
What?
I explained quickly that I was already at my max hours for the week, and the AM FEM had cleared us with the GM that I punch out at 10:45 p.m. and had written it down on the schedule. All the while, the checkout coach is trying to ring up some of the migrant workers, and the cashier is signaling that she needs the manager's help. Mel looked like she was going to have a conniption, but she can't because my butt is covered. I punched out, grabbed my keys from my locker, and headed out the door. The cherry on top, I found out later that Mel had to throw the garbage out herself, after it had sat in the back for several hours and blocked the door, meaning that she had to move each bag at least twice. Because the bags weren't the greatest quality, many of them ripped, spilling foul-smelling garbage everywhere, forcing her to then clean the floor. Food was stored there short-term before it was moved to the shelves. Since she was always a sharp dresser, I have no doubt she had to get some clothes professionally laundered, if not just throw it out. It was almost 1 when she was able to leave, from what I heard. Even suckier for her, she was salaried, so it didn't matter how many hours she worked, she didn't get paid anymore. I wish I could say this stopped her from being a royal bitch, but it didn't. She couldn't say anything to me, though, because I was just making sure I didn't waste any more time and kept busy. 2. I used to be a human resources specialist in the army. At the time of this story, I was about 19. I generally did my job well and passed my fitness exams with flying colors. But I was very socially awkward back then. If there was a joke being made, I was the butt of it. I was basically Radar from MASH, but less endearing and no ESP. I was also frequently on extra duty. Extra duty basically extends your workday several hours past when everyone else goes home. It was a punishment for constantly being late, which was a statement I was making because the office clock was 5 minutes fast and nobody cared enough to have it fixed. They never fixed it. I even got in trouble for being 5 minutes early because 5 minutes early is 10 minutes late. During extra duty, I was given many meaningful tasks like scrubbing and power washing concrete for no reason, painting entire offices for no reason, picking up pine cones for no reason, sweeping the parking lot for no reason, and my most hated chore of all, buffing. Every night, I buffed the same floor. Every night, I applied several coats of finish to the same floor. I applied over 20 gallons of floor finish to that Crowellian kitchen-sized tile floor in just a 2-month span. And it was never good enough. Every morning my company, one sergeant, first sergeant, would come in and say the same thing. "What the hell you been doing all night, Ziggs? If I can't see my reflection, it's not good enough. It should be looking like in a mirror." Bear in mind I had no clue what I was doing, and they didn't really give me any detailed instructions. I had no idea which buffer pads to use, how much finish to use, how many coats were needed, etc. One night I was approaching my breaking point because I had just stripped the floor for the first time the previous night and nearly passed out, when he decided to throw me yet another curveball. "You ever wax a floor before, Ziggs?" He hands me a can of wax. "No, First Sergeant, I haven't." He takes the can back, opens it, then scoops out a small amount with a rag, proceeding to spread it over a tile in a circular motion by hand until it disappears. I did not make a Karate Kid joke at the time. I was too busy explaining that I didn't have enough time to do the entire process, plus tile by tile waxing before the night was over. He didn't care. I got the usual response to my protests: "Get it done." You want me to fully buff, finish, and wax the floor in roughly the same amount of time it takes me to just buff it, and with no prior experience or instruction. Cue malicious compliance. I didn't bother asking how much wax to use or how many times I should go over each tile. I didn't want to know. At that point, I didn't care. What I did know was that skaters often waxed curbs in my hometown to allow the skateboard to slide on it, also known as grinding. I sped through my usual buffing and didn't even bother with more than 1 coat of finish. I then broke out the wax can and rag and began my new task. I waxed that floor, then I waxed it some more. I waxed that floor until my arms ached, and I waxed unevenly. Some areas got waxed way more than others. 2100, 9 p.m. rolls around, and my sergeant comes and locks up so I can leave. The next morning, I came in after our usual morning fitness routine and sat down at my desk, which happened to directly face the doorway to the floor I regularly slaved over. I could see a small portion of the room, but was not exposed enough for people to see me. I should mention that this floor was in the center of the building. If you wanted to get to any of the offices in the company, HQ, including my first sergeant's office, and even my own, you had to walk through that central room. As it turned out, quite a few people needed to walk through that room on this particular morning, and they were met by some rather challenging terrain. It was quite comical to see people in combat boots slipping all over the place like they were walking on ice, and gingerly trying to walk across it like they needed walkers. But the best part was when I heard the frantic squeaking boots followed by, "Damn it, Ziggs, never let him wax the floor again." And that's exactly what happened. Never did get feedback on the reflection, though. No fellow soldiers were injured as a result of this. 3. So this dates back to 1998. I had been working construction for a year as a drywall finisher, spreading mud, when I was offered a job on a big crew. Only reason they wanted me was to be a translator between English and French. I was good, but not fast or great at this point, but hey, $18 an hour was good money. We were working on a 5-story building. It was the first time I really had seen just the bones of a building. For those who are unfamiliar with this era of construction, I'm going to give a little background on how it worked on sites this big. Each company had their own construction trailer. No one really had email, so each trailer had a couple of phone lines and a secretary. This building was for a real estate company. It was to be their headquarters. It was designed by an architect in New York as a favor to the owner of the building. So here's where the problem goes. My boss, Al, had all the framing, hanging, the drywall, finishing the seams and acoustic ceiling tiles with metal grid. Al goes to the general contractor with an issue on 3rd floor training room. "We got a height problem with 3rd floor ceiling."
"What's wrong now?"
"He's got it at 4 feet off the floor."
"Wait, what?"
"Yeah, both ceiling reflected plan and elevation shows 4 feet off the finished floor. If I scale it, it would be 12 feet.
"Yeah, that don't sound right. Go ahead and send a request for information."
Back then, requests for information were different than today. Usually meant someone was going to have to pay. So Al faxes over the request for information and marks it urgent. When request for information comes back, they were sent both the general contractor and the subcontractor. So I'm sitting with Al and the general contractor just chatting around, and both secretaries come out to the site, almost running with high heels through the debris, and both with shit-eating grins on their face. I'm thinking, oh shit, this should be good.
"Slow down, ladies. Where's the fire?"
The general contractor secretary says, "You got an urgent fax." Al's secretary then says, "We got the request for the information back," he says, looking at the other secretary, giggling. They look at their paper, then look at me, and general contractor reads it out loud. "Request for information from Office of A-Hole Architect, Inc. Urgent request for information of discrepancy on ceiling height from A-Land Office about training room." Then there's a number. Answer: "How hard is it for your construction workers to understand, never scale anything, I don't make mistakes? Refer to page A804 for detailed height instructions." Cue malicious compliance.
"Well, Al, what does A804 say about ceiling heights?"
4 feet, bud."
"Hey, Frenchie, do you think you can translate that to the ceiling guys? Tell them it's hot priority, I want it done by Sunday."
"You heard him. Tell him to drop what he's doing and go to it." 10-4. I go to the guy and they greet me with a tabarnak, a French-Canadian cuss word. "Are you nuts, kid?" I tell them what had transpired and told them that Al said to make it 4 feet. They grumbled, saying they would charge to do it again. Now, this training room wasn't your typical space. It was 300 feet long by 40 feet wide that could be separated to make multiple training rooms or one giant one with folding partition. Monday comes, general contractor instructs the electrician to install all the lights as per prints.
Yes, even his prints had 4 feet notation.
Typically, we would wait for the electrician inspection, but we didn't. By Wednesday, the crew is putting tiles in. Saturday comes, and there's an owner meeting where he walks the job site with the general contractor and talks about progress. Everything is going good till he gets to the 3rd floor training room door and sees a bar 4 feet from the ground, and all the wires for the ceiling are in plain sight.
"What the hell is this? Don't you know how to read blueprints?" Yes, sir, we do, and we did. We also sent an RFI. Shows him the facts. The owner grins. Yeah, he definitely has an ego from hell. Do you have everything documented, pictures and all? You know it. Okay, smartass. Now do it at 12 feet, 4 feet from the deck. You're making 20% on this screw-up, aren't you? 20% to the build invoice. We're gonna have the demo crew come in. Then all new material plus the crew already said it's going to be 50% upcharge since we're preventing them from going to their next site. Yeah, just be happy it's not coming out of your pocket.
Because the architect gave the wrong information and it was built as per his guidelines, he had to fork out a few thousand out of his pocket to us dumb construction workers to fix his mistake. Learned 2 valuable lessons that day. 1, always do as you're told no matter if it makes sense, except when it endangers a life. 2, document everything no matter how trivial. It will cover your ass. 4. Once upon a time, many moons ago, I was a lowly peon, a project manager. Being repressed, working on a big $1 million project that my company was contracted to do for Client Corp. That was part of a larger project by the Client Corp. Things were progressing well. We had the job design and engineering done, materials ordered, ready to mobilize the team to the job site. All of a sudden, the client, Bob, says to us peons, "Hockey, your project will now be cancelled because the project will be cancelled." Of course, we weren't too happy about it because all the work we put up to that point basically just went up in smoke. 2, even with cancellation fees, that kind of just barely covered the costs we'd incurred to date, so no profit. 3, we were now stuck with a huge amount of materials we had to find a way to redeploy. 4, we knew that claiming cancellation fees was going to be a painful, thorny path. Boy, oh boy, was it truly painful and a thorny path to walk indeed. So my team and boss put together the supporting documents and prepared the job cancellation invoice. Then appointed me to deliver the news. Bob was not happy. So, negotiations started with Bob, his bosses, Adam, my boss, and me in the room. Barely 10 minutes in, and there's raised voices, palms slamming on the table. Angry men all around. Adam and myself tried our best to placate the client's team to no avail, even as they tried whatever intimidation tactics they could to bully us into dropping the cancellation fees. We worked out a few options beforehand to be more flexible, but all were shot down by Bob's team in anger. Finally, Adam said the magic words, "This cancellation clause is written into the master contract with MegaClient. If you don't agree to this, then perhaps we can escalate to MegaClient's higher management for arbitration." The room fell silent. Obviously, Bob's client's team already had a lot of foul-smelling substances on their plate already with the failure of the larger project as a whole. Their subsidiary organization was formed as a special purpose company just for this project, and the last thing they needed was more attention from the parent organization. Cue malicious compliance. "Fine," says Bob. "You know what? We'll pay you the cancellation fee, 50% of the purchase order value as stated in the contract." Bob's face took on a sinister smirk. "But we'll need to adjust the purchase order value." And with that, Adam and I got booted out of their office. The very next day, my company accounts department started screaming. Apparently the client had indeed adjusted the purchase order value from the original price down to $10,000. That was a considerable drop. That meant that the cancellation fee, going by the letter of the contract, was now only $5,000. Jesus, talk about a low blow. But wait, there's more. All subsequent attempts to reach out to Bob and his team by phone or email were stonewalled. Finally, after a few days, I personally paid Bob a visit at his office, only to have him laugh in my face and basically say, "What you gonna do about it?" Other follow-up meeting requests to Bob and his team were denied outright for a couple of weeks. Finally, Adam pulled some strings to have our company's senior management talk to MegaClient's senior management, after which we got to meet with an entirely different team than before. Enter Charlie. Charlie was on a different part of the team from Bob, and we hadn't had any dealings with him before. Charlie told us that Bob had been transferred back to MegaClient HQ. Client Corp was being disbanded. And now Charlie had to take over from Bob. Charlie also had no idea what had transpired before this, so we filled him in. You see, Bob had pulled a fast malicious compliance on us. He knew he was being transferred back to HQ, so he tried to screw us over, and also make it look like the project cancellation costs were smaller than what they actually were. To give Charlie due credit, he did try to help us resolve the cancellation fees. Only problem is, with the stunt that Bob had pulled just before leaving, we were collectively stuck in a cesspit. You see, in order to correct the purchase order to the original correct value, it needed to be verified by the originator of said purchase order, Bob, who was no longer around, and approved by a manager, Bob's boss, who was also no longer around. To make things worse, since the larger project had been cancelled, finance and accounting functions were now taken over by MacLeod's finance team, who had no idea of the backstory, and a buttload of suspicion as to why the purchase order now has to be retroactively increased after project cancellation in order to facilitate the cancellation fee payment to a supplier. By a huge amount, no less.
What do you mean you need to increase the purchase order amount after the fact? We need to get verification from the originator and approver to proceed.
All in the midst of a corporate reshuffle within Client and MacLeod Corp, which meant we had to deal with a rotating cast of different people who again had no idea of the backstory of this. Fun times. All in all, it took us a year of painful back-and-forth explanations and negotiations, often repeating the same story to multiple senior managers, multiple parties, accusations of fraud, some creative negotiations, including transference of inventory to the company MacLeod to support some of their other projects, which in turn messed with our company's other projects with MacLeod, to get things finally resolved and recoup our losses. Meanwhile, just dealing with all this meant that effectively I couldn't be reassigned to other projects, because dealing with this became a full-time job in itself. Thus went one of the most stressful and unproductive years of my career, and also an abject lesson in personal and professional integrity. Please, dear readers, don't do this to your suppliers, and always pay attention to the cancellation clauses in your contracts. 5. This story took place in 2007. It still pays off, quite literally. I'm from Brazil, meaning different legislation and probably some grammar incorrectness. I worked as an IT assistant in the education area. It was a good job, excellent work hours, and the team was great. The school was a very small one, owned and directed by a husband and wife and some other family. My job was initially as an IT assistant, which means hardware and software stuff. But since there was no senior IT, I was the IT. Not really a problem, since the demands for me were basically editing documents and maintaining the website. This was 2003, and things were good. Fast forward 4 years, and I'm still IT assistant, but in charge of 2 interns, systems maintenance, IT security, user support, and all the publicity. Again, all good, since I had the time to study and work in another place repairing hardware. One day, the owner's wife called me in her office. I noticed rage in her face. She was red as a tomato when I entered the room. She closes the door and starts screaming.
Asgard 2K18. You are stealing from the school. Look at these reports from accounting. You are not billing these students. You are stealing from my family.
Her face red, and the angry expression completed a very disturbing scene from a 50-year-old small and fat woman. She gave me the reports, and I murmured, "Okay, I'll have to look into that." She starts to scream again.
You don't even realize what I'm talking about. This is what happens when you don't pay attention to your work. Go on and get me some answers on how much you cost us.
Okay, I'll have to look into that. And I leave her office. With the report in hands, I started to calculate and found some inconsistencies. The process was very simple. I generated the invoices, and the accounting director, her brother, had to authorize the batch to send to the bank. If the bank finds any inconsistency, they return to the system, and the director has to authorize or not. Sometimes we would edit the values for discounts, calculation errors, or typos, things like that. Since I didn't have access to this part of the system, I took the blame, since I couldn't explain how that happened. Life goes on. One day, months later of the episode, the computer god smiled at me. The accounting director asks me to help him. Asgard, OK18, I'm getting this stupid red flag on the names. I don't know what it is. Solve it and I can confirm and send the invoice to the bank. Normally I click on the names and then click yes, and the flags go away. It's not working. I clicked and the message was, do you confirm cancelling this invoice? I stared at him and asked, you really click yes every month? He confirms. I explained that he should choose no to send the invoice back to me. He thanked me and I began my evil plan. You know, when you're the only IT from somewhere, 3 things the owner should keep in mind. 1, the control of all the passwords. 2, the control of the processes from IT. 3, the patience that IT requires. We are problem solvers on caffeine and hate. We don't sleep. We are fed by light. We are legion. The plan was simple. Make the business more and more automated and IT dependent, which on a normal business would be very good news. But it was not. Since no one knows at this school how important IT is, remember that I was still an assistant, even doing all the job. I made sure that all the processes were automated. For an entire year I busted my ass working in methods to put all the processes on automatic pilot. I created some cool bots, Python for those interested, to integrate the systems and almost no human interaction. In 2008 I ended the automation process and quit. The school was kinda happy functioning without an IT person, and for an entire year, all was good. One day in 2009 I get a call from the other owner, the husband. Asgard, OK18, we are having a problem with the system, could you fix it? You know, I hold grudges, and this was my time to glow. Hey, Mr. Owner, I can fix it. I will charge you $100. Is that good for you? Yes, Asgard, OK18. After fixing what was wrong, I advise, you should hire an IT person or outsource IT. He says okay. 1 month later again he calls. There's another problem with the printer, can you fix it? Yep, it's $200. Okay. Since they didn't do anything about it, I offered a malicious contract to help the school for $1,000 a month, with an extra $150 for any visit. They agreed. Fast forward, it's 2021. They still don't have an IT department, they still pay me $2,000 a month, plus $250 per extra visit. And the computer system works like a charm. The accounting director knows that he did wrong in the past. They don't talk about it. The owner's wife knows that I know the brother is a stupid account director, and if I open my mouth, he has to be fired. They don't talk about it. The owner tried to change the automation system. The cost is prohibitive. The system that I made is free for them to use, but if they want a manual, there's a cost, since I was an IT assistant, not a programmer. The manual is in the program font. To know this, they have to contact an IT person, which they won't. We don't talk about it. Now I have a contract. Don't do practically anything, and they are obligated to pay me since they don't have the knowledge and are afraid of me. If they want to change anything, I'll have to look into that. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to Revenge is Ice Cream, episode 102. And thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use their stories in this video. If you enjoyed the video, then please do like and subscribe. Comments are optional but appreciated. Alright, I don't believe we have any shoutouts today. This is the 17th, isn't it? Yes, we don't have any today. Right, lovely. Alright, as of today's video, possibly yesterday's as well, who knows? I'm in the past, this is the future, things happen. I have now added the PO Box for Hellfreezer to the description of the videos. It will be active for 6 months, at which point it will explode. Or possibly just shut down. I don't really know how they work these things. Maybe they take it back and shoot it. I've never had a PO Box before. I have a shout out apparently for my bestest mod Barry, just for being the bestest mod. I have to do that or she'll yell at me. Okay, anyway, the PO Box in the description. If you have letters or anything you want to send to me, that's fine. For anything else, sure, absolutely. I'm not gonna tell you not to send stuff. Just be mindful of how much it might cost you to send it overseas, and some things may not survive transport. Also, I will reject any large boxes about the size of a human being with holes poked in it. Alright, and with that, I'm going to head off for now. So until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourself.